There's a danger in moving before God, in stepping ahead of his divine plan, in thinking that we know better than the one who created time itself. Too often we find ourselves impatient, restless, eager to make things happen on our own terms. But when we move before God, we invite struggle, disappointment, and unnecessary battles that were never meant for us. Think about Saul. The man was chosen by God, anointed as Israel's first king, positioned for greatness. But when the pressure came, when the people started murmuring, when the enemy stood near, Saul did what so many of us do. He moved ahead of God. Instead of waiting for the prophet Samuel to arrive and offer the sacrifices God had instructed, Saul took matters into his own hands. He saw the people scattering, he felt the weight of leadership, and he panicked. So he stepped into a role that wasn't his, performed a duty that wasn't given to him, and in that one moment of impatience, he lost the kingdom. God rejected him, not because he wasn't capable, not because he wasn't strong, but because he wouldn't wait. How many of us have forfeited blessings because we couldn't wait? How many times have we forced relationships, chased opportunities, or taken shortcuts, thinking we were making progress, only to end up further from where God wanted us to be? Moving before God may feel like control, but in reality, it's an act of fear, an unwillingness to trust that his timing is better than ours. Some of us have been praying for things, believing for breakthroughs, asking for direction, but the silence is uncomfortable. We look around and see others getting their blessings, moving forward, building businesses, walking down the aisle, stepping into their purpose, and we think, maybe I should just do it myself. But just because something looks good doesn't mean it's God. Just because it works for someone else doesn't mean it's meant for you right now. The enemy loves to make us anxious in the waiting. He whispers lies telling us we're being left behind, that God has forgotten about us, that if we don't act now, we'll miss out. But let me tell you, there is nothing that God has ordained for you that you will miss if you stay in position. What is meant for you is already yours. You don't have to fight for it, manipulate for it, or rush into it. You just have to trust that when the time is right, God will open the door. Abraham and Sarah learned this the hard way. God gave them a promise, told them they would have a son. But when the years passed and nothing happened, they decided to help God. Sarah gave her servant Hagar to Abraham, thinking that maybe this was the way God intended for the promise to come to pass. But what they created in their impatience became a source of pain, conflict, and division. Ishmael was born, but he was not the promise. He was the result of human effort trying to do what only God could do. And even though God still fulfilled his promise through Isaac, the consequences of that decision followed them for generations. What are you trying to birth out of season? What are you pushing for before it's time? What doors are you forcing open that God never intended for you to walk through? When we move before God, we end up carrying burdens that were never meant for us. We cry over situations we were never supposed to be in, fight battles we were never meant to face, and suffer heartaches that could have been avoided if we had only waited. God's delays are not his denials. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean God isn't working. Sometimes he's protecting you. Sometimes he's preparing you. Sometimes he's making sure that when you step into what he has for you, you're strong enough to handle it. If Saul had just waited a little longer, if Abraham and Sarah had trusted a little more, how different would their stories have been? And if you wait on God, if you trust his timing over your own, how much more peace, joy, and blessing will you walk into? So don't move before God. No matter how much pressure you feel, no matter how loud the voices around you get, no matter how tempting it is to take matters into your own hands, stand still. Trust him. He knows what he's doing. And when the time is right, he will move in a way that will leave no doubt that it was him all along. God's timing is perfect. That's a truth we know, but it's not always a truth we like. Because when life feels stagnant, when prayers seem unanswered, when the promises God has spoken don't seem to be coming to pass, it's easy to start wondering if maybe, just maybe, God is running late. But let me tell you something. God is never late. He's never early. He moves at the exact right time, in the exact right way, to accomplish the exact right purpose. The challenge is his timing often doesn't align with our expectations. We live in a world that moves fast. Instant access, instant gratification, instant results. But God is not bound by human schedules. He doesn't rush just because we feel impatient, and he doesn't delay out of neglect. He moves when the conditions are right, not when we think they're right, but when he knows they are. Look at Abraham and Sarah. God told them they would have a son, that their descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. But the years passed and nothing happened. They waited, they believed, but eventually doubt crept in. Maybe they misunderstood. Maybe God needed a little help. So Sarah suggested that Abraham have a child with her servant Hagar. And while their impatience produced Ishmael, Ishmael was not the promise. The promise was still coming, but because they tried to rush God's timing, they created complications they were never meant to endure. How many times have we done the same thing? How many times have we gotten tired of waiting and tried to help God only to create problems that were never part of his plan? How many times have we forced something before it's time only to realize later that we should have waited? Moving outside of God's timing doesn't speed up his promise, it only prolongs the process. But when we wait on God, when we trust his timing, when we refuse to move ahead of him, we position ourselves to receive the fullness of what he has for us. Because when God brings something to pass, it is complete. It is whole. It is not something we have to fight to maintain or struggle to hold on to. What God ordains, he sustains. Lazarus was sick, and his sisters, Mary and Martha, sent word to Jesus expecting him to come right away. But Jesus didn't move immediately. He stayed where he was for 2 more days. And by the time he arrived, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. In their eyes, Jesus was late. He had missed his moment. But in reality, Jesus was right on time. Because if he had come when they wanted him to, he would have healed a sick man. But by waiting, he resurrected a dead man. Sometimes God delays because what we're asking for is too small. We're asking for healing, and he's planning resurrection. We're asking for provision, and he's setting up overflow. We're asking for a door, and he's building an entire house. If God isn't moving as quickly as you'd like, don't get discouraged. Don't assume he's forgotten about you. Don't believe the lie that he's passing you by. He's setting you up for something greater than you imagine. The problem with rushing God's timing is that it often leads us into situations we aren't prepared for. You might want that promotion now, but if God gave it to you before you were ready, it would crush you instead of elevate you. You might be praying for a spouse, but if God brought them into your life before he finished working on you, the blessing could turn into a burden. God's delays are not his denials, they are his protection. They are his preparation. They are his way of ensuring that when the blessing comes, you will be ready to receive it. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, not because God couldn't bring them into the promised land sooner, but because they weren't ready. He had to work some things out of them before they could step into the fullness of their inheritance. He had to remove their slave mentality, build their faith, teach them to depend on Him, and when they were ready, then He brought them in. Not a moment too soon. God's timing is not just about the destination, it's about the process. He is more concerned with who you're becoming than where you're going. He is developing you, strengthening you, teaching you to trust Him so that when you step into what He has for you, you will be able to sustain it. So if you're in a season of waiting, don't grow weary, don't lose heart, don't try to force something that isn't ready. Trust that God knows what He's doing. Trust that He sees the full picture. Trust that when the time is right, He will move. And when He moves, you'll know without a doubt that it was Him. There is something about the waiting season that can feel heavy. When God gives you a vision, when He plants a promise in your heart, when He speaks something over your life, there's an expectation that things should start moving, that doors should open, that progress should happen. But what do you do when nothing is moving, when it feels like you're standing still? When you know God has called you to something greater, but you're still stuck in a place that looks nothing like what He promised. That's where faith is tested the most. Not in the excitement of the vision, not in the celebration of the breakthrough, but in the in-between, in that space where it feels like nothing is happening. That's the place where doubt tries to creep in. That's the place where frustration tries to settle. That's the place where you start wondering, did I hear God correctly? Did I misunderstand? Am I waiting on God, or is God waiting on me? And if you're not careful, impatience will push you into moving before the time is right. That's what happened with the Israelites. God had already promised them the land, already declared victory over them, already set aside blessings for them. But when Moses went up to Mount Sinai to receive instructions from the Lord, the people got tired of waiting. They got restless. They started looking around thinking, where is Moses? Where is God? We need to do something. And instead of waiting for the promise, they created their own answer. They built a golden calf, something they could see, something they could touch, something that gave them a sense of movement, even though it was completely outside of God's will. How many times have we done the same thing? When God takes longer than we expect, when the promise doesn't come as quickly as we want, we start looking for something, anything that feels like movement. We force relationships that aren't meant for us. We take jobs we weren't called to. We make decisions out of impatience instead of out of obedience. And then when things start falling apart, we ask God why it didn't work. But here's the truth. Everything that God has for you is worth the wait. Every promise, every blessing, every opportunity that He has assigned to your life is already set in motion. But if you move before the appointed time, you risk stepping outside of His provision. You risk exhausting for something less than what He intended. You risk exhausting yourself trying to maintain something that God never built. Look at Sarah. God had already promised her a son, already declared that she would give birth to nations. But because time passed and nothing happened, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She gave her servant Hagar to Abraham, thinking that maybe this was the way to bring the promise to life. And what was supposed to be a blessing turned into a burden. Because when we try to produce what only God can bring forth, we create complications we were never meant to endure. That's why it's so important to stay in alignment with God's timing. Not just to hear the promise, not just to receive the vision, but to wait until God says, move, because when the time is right, everything will fall into place without force. When the time is right, the door will open without you having to manipulate it. When the time is right, the opportunity will present itself, and you won't have to wonder if it's from God. You'll know. David was anointed as king, but he didn't step into the throne right away. He had to wait. He had to go through a process. He had to endure seasons that looked nothing like the promise. And even when he had the chance to take the throne early, when Saul was vulnerable, when his men encouraged him to seize the moment, David refused. Because he understood something that we all need to learn. Just because you have the opportunity doesn't mean it's the time. God's promises don't need shortcuts. What he has spoken over your life will come to pass when he says so, how he says so. And if you try to rush it, if you try to force it, you may end up with something that looks like the promise but doesn't carry the anointing of it. There is a difference between what you produce in your own strength and what God births in his timing. So if you're in a season of waiting, don't be discouraged. Don't let impatience push you into something premature. Don't let frustration cause you to settle for something less than what God has for you. What he has prepared is greater than what you could ever create on your own. And when the time is right, he will make it happen, and you won't have to chase it, strive for it, or force it. It will be exactly what he promised. When God speaks a word over your life, when he places a calling on you, when he sets something in motion, there is nothing the enemy can do to cancel it. There is no obstacle strong enough, no delay long enough, no opposition fierce enough to stop what God has ordained. But the question is not whether God will fulfill his promise. The question is, will you trust him until he does? It's easy to have faith at the beginning when the vision is fresh, when the word is clear, when the excitement of possibility is stirring in your spirit. It's easy to believe when the first doors open, when things start aligning, when you can see the hand of God moving. But what happens when it takes longer than you expected? What happens when you hit resistance? What happens when every sign around you suggests that nothing is changing? That's when you find out if your faith is in God or if your faith is in progress. Because faith is not about what you see, it's about what you know. It's about believing that even when nothing is happening, something is happening. That God is working behind the scenes, setting things up, orchestrating details, preparing the right people, aligning the right opportunities. That just because you don't see movement doesn't mean God isn't moving. That's why you can't let delays make you doubt. You can't let silence make you settle. You can't let the enemy convince you that because it hasn't happened yet, it's not going to happen. When God makes a promise, he keeps it. He is not a man that he should lie. He does not change his mind. What he spoke over you before time began is still in motion, still unfolding, still coming together, even if you can't see it yet. Joseph had a dream as a teenager, a vision from God that he would be in a position of great authority, that he would be elevated, that he would be used for something greater. But the moment he received the vision, his life went in the opposite direction. Instead of being lifted up, he was thrown down into a pit, into slavery, into a prison. Every step of the way, it seemed like the promise was getting further and further away. But what Joseph didn't realize was that every setback was actually a setup. Every delay was actually development. Every closed door was positioning him for the exact place God had destined him to be. And when the time was right, God moved so quickly that Joseph went from the prison to the palace in a single day. What looked like wasted years, what looked like unanswered prayers, what looked like repeated rejection was actually God's divine process. Because when God fulfills his promise, he does it in such a way that no one can take credit but him. That's why you can't give up now. You can't let frustration talk you out of what God has spoken. You can't let impatience cause you to move ahead of God, because what he has for you is still coming. And when it comes, it will happen so swiftly, so powerfully, so undeniably that you will look back and realize that every delay was part of the plan. Some of you are in the waiting season right now. Some of you are in the middle of what feels like a contradiction, where what God has promised and what you see don't seem to match. But don't let that shake your faith. Don't let that cause you to step out of position, because when God is ready to move, nothing will be able to stop it. You don't have to manipulate it. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to force it. All you have to do is stay in alignment. Stay faithful, stay prayerful, keep believing, keep trusting, keep standing, because when the appointed time comes, you won't have to go looking for it. It will find you. And when it does, you will know that it was God. You will know that it was worth the wait. You will know that he never forgot, never changed his mind, never abandoned his word over your life, because what he starts, he finishes. What he ordains, he fulfills. What he promises, he brings to pass. And when he moves, everything changes. Waiting is not just about time, it's about trust. It's about believing that God knows what he's doing even when nothing around you makes sense. It's about standing firm when everything in you wants to run ahead, take control, and make things happen on your own. Waiting is not passive, it's active faith. It's a declaration that says, I trust God enough to let him lead. But let's be real, waiting is hard. Waiting can feel like being stuck, like being overlooked, like everyone else is moving forward while you're standing still. It can test your faith in ways nothing else can. One of the hardest things about waiting is that it exposes what's really in us. It's easy to have faith when things are moving, when prayers are being answered, when doors are opening. But what about when nothing is happening? What about when you've prayed, fasted, believed, and still nothing? What about when God seems silent? That's where real faith is tested. That's where you find out if you trust God or if you just trust what he can do for you. The children of Israel had to learn this. When God brought them out of Egypt, he didn't take them straight to the promised land. He led them into the wilderness, a place of waiting, a place of testing, a place where they had to rely on him daily. He gave them manna, but only enough for one day at a time. He wanted to see if they would trust him for tomorrow or if they would panic and try to take matters into their own hands. If they're knowing in their act, and many of them failed the test. They complained, they doubted, they rebelled, because waiting has a way of revealing what's in your heart. But waiting isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's in the waiting that God strengthens you, refines you, and removes the things in you that can't go into your next season. Some of us are waiting not because God is denying us, but because he's developing us. There are things we're asking for that we're not ready for yet. There are doors we want to walk through, but if God opened them too soon, they would crush us instead of bless us. God doesn't just want to give you what you're praying for. He wants to make sure you can handle it when it comes. That's why Isaiah 40:31 says, but those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Waiting is not about losing strength, it's about gaining it. God is using this time to equip you, to stretch you, to build endurance in you so that when he releases you, you won't faint under the weight of the blessing. David understood this. He was anointed as king while he was still a shepherd boy. The promise was spoken over his life, but he didn't step into it right away. He had to go back to the field, back to tending sheep, back to a season that didn't look anything like what God had promised him. And then when he did step forward, it wasn't onto a throne, it was into battle. Before he ever wore a crown, he had to fight Goliath. Before he ever sat in authority, he had to run from Saul. God had called him to be king, but there was a process he had to go through first. Some of us are in the process right now. We know what God has spoken. We know what he's called us to. We feel the weight of destiny on us, but we're still in the waiting. And if we're not careful, we'll let frustration talk us out of the promise. We'll let impatience push us into something we're not ready for. We'll start thinking that maybe God forgot. Maybe we misunderstood. Maybe we need to make something happen on our own. But God does not forget his promises. If he said it, he will do it. The question is, can you trust him in the meantime? Waiting is a test of faith, but it's also a test of character. God isn't just concerned with getting you to the promise. He's concerned with making sure you're the right person for the promise. He's more interested in who you're becoming than in how fast you get there. That's why the process takes time. That's why he's stretching you, refining you, molding you, because when he does release you, he wants you to be able to sustain the blessing, not just receive it. So if you're waiting right now, don't despise it. Don't rush the process. Don't let frustration cause you to move ahead of God. What he has for you is worth the wait. And when the time is right, he will move so swiftly, so powerfully, so undeniably that you'll look back and realize he was never late. He was preparing you all along. One of the greatest challenges we face in life is knowing what to do and when to do it. Opportunities come, decisions must be made, paths must be chosen, and if we're not careful, we can find ourselves moving in the wrong direction simply because we didn't seek God first. It's easy to rely on our own understanding, to trust in what we see, to lean on logic and experience. But Proverbs 3:05-6 reminds us, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. There is something powerful about seeking God's guidance before making a move, because when we do, we step into divine alignment. We walk in wisdom. We avoid unnecessary pain, unnecessary setbacks, unnecessary struggles that come from doing things our own way. But too often we pray after we've already made the decision. We ask God to bless what we've already started instead of asking him if we should start it in the first place. Look at Joshua and the Israelites. God had just given them a miraculous victory at Jericho. They had seen the walls fall down. They had experienced his power firsthand. But when they approached the city of Ai, they didn't stop to seek God. They assumed that because Jericho had been an easy victory, Ai would be too. They moved without consulting the Lord, and they suffered defeat. Not because God had changed, not because he wasn't with them, but because they didn't ask for his direction. How many times have we done the same thing? We assume that just because something looks good, it must be from God. Just because a door is open doesn't mean we're supposed to walk through it. Just because an opportunity is in front of us doesn't mean it's God's plan for us. And if we don't take the time to seek his guidance, we can end up walking into battles we were never supposed to fight. Seeking God's guidance is more than just asking him to bless our plans. It's surrendering our plans to him. It's saying, Lord, before I move, before I decide, before I act, I need to know, what do you want me to do? Because the truth is, we don't always know what's best. Our perspective is limited. We see what's right in front of us, but God sees the full picture. He sees the roadblocks we can't see, the detours we don't expect, the dangers we don't anticipate. And when we trust him to lead us, he guides us in ways that protect us and position us for greater things. David understood this principle well. Before every battle, he inquired of the Lord. Even when he was a skilled warrior, even when he had experience, even when it seemed like he already knew what to do, he still asked, Lord, shall I go up? Shall I pursue? Will you give me the victory? And because he sought God's direction, he never fought a battle alone. He never moved outside of God's will, and as a result, he walked in consistent victory. But when we don't seek God, when we rely on our own understanding, we end up in situations we were never meant to be in. We chase after things that aren't meant for us. We connect with people who pull us away from our purpose. We enter into relationships, jobs, commitments that God never assigned to us. And then we wonder why we feel lost, why we feel overwhelmed, why things aren't working out. It's because we move before we ask. God desires to lead us, but he won't force us to follow him. He has given us free will, the ability to choose. And some of us are struggling not because the enemy attacked us, but because we made decisions without asking God first. But the good news is, it's never too late to surrender. It's never too late to say, Lord, I don't want to do this without you. Show me the way. If I've moved in the wrong direction, correct me. If I'm walking a path you never intended for me, redirect me. When we truly seek God, when we wait on his direction, when we refuse to move until we hear from him, we step into a level of favor and wisdom that is unmatched. We don't have to second guess every decision. We don't have to live in fear of making the wrong choice, because when God is leading, we can move forward with confidence, knowing that every step is ordered, every path is secured, and every promise he has spoken will come to pass in his perfect time. So before you move, before you decide, before you act, seek him. Let him lead you. Because where he leads, there is peace. Where he leads, there is provision. Where he leads, there is purpose. And when you follow his voice, you will never be lost.